$40.
What? He's trying to sell rocks?
For $40.
Is he high?
$40.
What?
All right. Hello and welcome everyone to What Needs to Be Done Today, also known as WNTBD Today Network. This podcast is sponsored by the MAAT American Aborigine Tribal Nation. Thank you all so much for being here. As always, we want to welcome in and give honor, love and thanks to our ancestors and also to our wonderful podcast team who are with us today. Carmela Mitchell-Bay, Shatika Killebrew Bay, Anita Wills, and thank you to myself, Tracy L. Bay, and Shatika Killebrew Bay, our wonderful podcast team coordinator. And also we want to give thanks to our wonderful guest speaker for today, Dr. Malo. After our speaker, we will have an open discussion. You can type any questions well, actually today it'll be a little different, but after we're done, we will have an open discussion. You can always raise your hand. You can press *9 on your phone. Excuse me, and you can raise your hand by pressing *9. Please be sure to *6 and mute your phone just while the speaker is talking so that we can hear everything that's being said. And with that, I will give the floor to Dr. Malo, our guest speaker. Dr. Malo, the floor is yours.
What's your camera? What's your camera?
Closing my camera now. The floor is yours, Dr. Malo.
Is your camera full? Is your camera full?
Hello, this is Chief Malo coming to you from WNTBD Today Network. We'll be continuing our various topics of the Matriarch Speaks in a month or so. However, this podcast is what we call It Takes a Crystal Village. We take our cue from our Indigenous ancestors who emphasize the importance of raising a child in a supportive environment with different viewpoints and varied experience, which includes family, friends, teachers, neighbors, other community members, in fact, all of us. In essence, the village represents a network of individuals who contribute to a child's or an individual's holistic development by providing love, support, guidance, and a sense of community. We are all responsible and accountable, and no matter what your age, we are all still children at heart. You are all welcome to join our free Crystal Village community and network with us. Just go to mayaatcrystalvillage.com. You can access either on your computer or download the app by the same name on an Android phone from the Google Play Store. For the next 4 weeks, I'm going to discuss image and colorism. Understand that this is a hot topic and has many layers, facets, opinions, and viewpoints. So this week is just an introduction and overview. I wanted to say brief overview, but as most of you who are familiar with pastors and church services, when a pastor says, "I won't be before you long," that's your cue to sit back because you know a long sermon is coming. I'll do my best to stay within my assigned time limit. Those of you on the phone are at a temporary disadvantage since you won't see the screen. However, you will be able to view it later. So first, let me preface that I understand and know that there are some of you who are more knowledgeable than me on this subject and probably a host of other subjects. However, I'm going to insist during the discussion time that you refrain from using this arena at this time to teach, educate, or get your own agenda or political point across. That is, until we get to week 4, the last week, and then bring it on. One thing to always keep in mind is the old saying, physician, heal thyself. You always start inwardly and then move outwardly. You can't lead until you first learn how to follow. You cannot spread great wisdom until you first learn how to listen to the wise, understanding that wise and old are not necessarily synonymous. My goal is to bring us into the conscious awareness of a topic that affects us even when we are unconsciously aware of it. There are historical, cultural, and social causes and effects that we will touch on. We as a people have been treating and nursing our psychological wounds for far too long, attempting to cover them up with ego-protected band-aids, but never feeling secure enough to first openly acknowledge the deep, agonizing cognitive pain, work together to discover the source, examine our complicity in our own wounds and the wounds of others, and then take corrective action by doing what needs to be done today. Now, please understand that when I say we as a people, I mean all living beings on this planet that I call Earth. However, I, like all of us, only have so much time in this 3D existence. In this dispensation, in this particular time, space, and dimension, in this particular living form and experience. Therefore, I have to limit my direct focus, that is, start close to home and then travel abroad, so to speak. Now, I taught both English and math. However, math was my favorite, so I could never understand why my students didn't like working with fractions and percentages. But when they began to see how using fractions can make a difference in the taste of your food, whether or not you use a half a teaspoon of salt rather than a 4th teaspoon in your recipe, or the big difference between earning 25% on your savings in the bank as opposed to 10%, and especially when you can only afford 1 pizza, how you can equally split 8 pieces between 12 people. I said of all that to say that when adding fractions, you want to pinpoint a common denominator. Find the least common denominator, and when all is said and done, reduce everything to the least common denominator. Therefore, I must first cater to society's least common denominator. That is, the melanated/copper tone indigenous people, or quote unquote Black indigenous community. No other people in every area of life have had such far-reaching generational wounds that have still not been healed, mostly because corrective action to repair and provide remedy in 2025 has still yet to occur. As most researchers, I went into the subject with preconceived notions based on my personal experiences and experiences of others, especially my ancestors, whereby I formulated a subjective premise. However, I kept an open mind and I narrowed my research to 11 literary resources, which I'll make available through a link in the Crystal Village community. As I delved into this subject, I encountered a few surprises, which I'll share in the coming weeks. Also, due to the nature of this topic, I intentionally, am not on camera until the last week's presentation. Now, it's important to understand that colorism and racism are not exactly the same thing. Not every racial group experiences racism. However, just about every racial group has and does experience colorism. A key difference between racism and colorism is that while racism deals with the subjugation, that is, domination and control of one group by another, or the belief in racial supremacy, colorism deals with in-group discrimination in addition to between-group discrimination. The term colorism was first coined by Miss Alice Walker, author of the book The Color Purple, which was published in 1982. And by the way, Miss Walker won a Pulitzer Prize the following year in 1983 and is the first melanated indigenous woman to win a Pulitzer for fiction. Now, believe it or not, colorism is a global cultural practice. Colorism deals with prejudice or discrimination against individuals with a dark skin tone, typically among people of the same ethnic or racial group. Colorism focuses on how racism is expressed in the psychology of a people and how it affects their concepts of beauty, wealth, privilege, and other facets of life. As for image has to do with pictures and symbols. We form images from what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we touch, what we taste, and even from our extrasensory perception. Even before you were born, images are impressed upon your ever-growing and forming body and psyche. The human camera, that is the eye, takes between 30 and 60 frames per second. The muscles that control your eyes are the most active in your entire body. And the eyes can process images in about 13 milliseconds. Milli is thousandths. That's with the DTHS on the end. So that 0.013, so that's 0.013 of a second. And yep, that's fractions again, okay? Regardless of whether you understand consciously what a picture or an image means, your subconscious reacts to them. Like dream imagery, symbols speak to us at a deep level and trigger insights in an immediate and powerful way. Remember the old saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words? Well, this is a familiar image made with 1,000 words. Well, as most sayings go, the original wording gets paraphrased and changed over time. The actual saying was used in 1921 in advertisements which said, "One look is worth 1,000 words." And they also used the saying, "One picture is worth 10,000 words." Even though some of them marked it as a Chinese proverb from Confucius, what he actually said was, "Hearing something 100 times is not better than seeing it once." Symbols and pictures can offer other advantages over words too. This is mainly because symbols and pictures bypass the analytical, orderly left brain and strike up a lively and dynamic conversation with the imaginative, intuitive right brain. They inspire you to think, but here's the key. Images in and of themselves don't really tell you what to think. The brainwashing. The disadvantages are when someone else uses a mechanism to control your thought process through brainwashing and mind control. When this brainwashing is intentional, it has long-range, systemic, traumatic, and detrimental effects. So as we explore colorism, we'll take a look at how, what part, if any, and to what extent image, with special emphasis on self-image, plays in perpetuating colorism, and by extension, perpetuating racism and other societal ills like economic disparity and social injustice. Now, let me reiterate, before we can deal with issues like economic disparity and social injustice, we have to first take a look at the root cause or causes, what part we ourselves play in it and perpetuate it, and then focus on what needs to be done within ourselves so that we can heal. We must remember that we cannot directly change other people or force them or make them change, but we can change ourselves. This is the catalyst to a societal change, to a community change in attitudes and mindset that will be beneficial for all. That is healing the whole village. As an example, I remember when I was 9 or 10, I used to get into discussions with my mother. I didn't know back then that I had a scientific mind, but the question I always asked her was, why? Why? She would not, or maybe she could not, give me definite answers. So after she grew exasperated with me, she would say, because I said so, that's why. Needless to say, that was the end of that discussion. And my mother always found me to be too idealistic for her taste, but she had to love me. She was my mother. She would always say emphatically, Rain, well, she always called me by my birth name. She said, Rain, you can't change the world. So I thought about that for a few years. Then one day I said, Mama, you said we can't change the world, but what's the world made of? Just people, right? So if I change, and then by my example and influence, you change, and then by your example and influence, another person changes, and so on, and so on, and so on. Hasn't then the world changed? She never answered, but I'm sure she thought about it. Well, she's part of my direct ancestral village, but she's been gone about 5 years now, so I can't get her concrete perspective on this topic. But we, who still are here, can use our past interactions and experiences and our current situations and challenges to explore the issues of image and colorism. By sharing, we can bring knowledge, awareness, and understanding to each other and those around us. So thank you all for listening. I'll end my introduction and overview by asking all of you, what's been your personal experience and challenges, if any, with image, self-image, and colorism? Now, please, moderators, make sure respondents limit their comments to 2 to 3 minutes at a time. As speakers, we tend to get carried away. I'm one of them. So we need moderators to lovingly keep us on time track. Remember, even if you don't get all your comments out this week, we'll spend 3 more weeks on the same topic. Also, if you feel you have an abundant amount to present, just contact Shatika Killebrew Bay, our podcast coordinator, and we will gladly welcome you to be a guest speaker. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I yield.
All right. Thank you so much to Maylo for that beautiful presentation. That is just a preview. That's part 1 of 4 for this entire month that we will do, that she is going to do and speak on image and colorism. And so like she asked, we'll now open the floor for discussion. What are your challenges or experiences that you have encountered as far as image, colorism? You can *6 to unmute your phone, *9 to raise your hand. The floor is open.
Hi, it's Carmela Mitchell Bay. Is my volume up loud enough?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. I was, as Chief was speaking, just thinking about my younger years of life, elementary school, and I attended an elementary school that was predominantly melanated people, and we have melanated teachers in our elementary school. But I do remember specifically that I often felt that the teachers favored those children who were either biracial or very light. And they got to, I don't know, maybe come to the candy jar before all of the rest of us. If they made a mistake on like a math problem, then they were treated gently, whereas some other people weren't treated as gently as they. I remember one little girl got the part in a play, um, and she was supposed to sing, and she couldn't even sing. But simply because of the way that she looked, it was my perception that she got that part. So she was always, and there were a couple others, always put on top. And then I remember that brainwashing Melo of Chief about not only our color, but your hair. It went from those people who had that silky hair who were melanated to those people, and they called their own hair like uh, cotton or something else. I can't remember. But now that was within our own people of it wasn't any other race, it was just us and how we kind of upheld those students or kids who were of lighter complexion. Now, I noticed that as a child, so I'm sure that other children in the classroom noticed it too.
Thank you so much for sharing, Camilla. Floor is open. Anyone else would like to add to the discussion? Floor is yours.
Hi, this is Anita.
Hey, Miss Anita.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Hello, Sister Anita.
Thank you for this interesting topic. It was Sister Kamala was speaking. I was thinking of us in grade school. The school that we went to was called a colored school, but there were Jewish people and us from the community, the colored community. Um, and I don't remember any of the children being treated any better. I guess because we were a colored school and all of us were, considered less than the Jewish students too. That's why they were not going to the private white schools or the Catholic schools. They were in the colored school. And there were some people that got treated better. To me, it was the one. I was a tomboy, so they was never going to treat me better. I always spoke before my time. Always was kind of hyper, so I didn't really. And all the teachers were white, and I didn't really. Most of the teachers, let me say it like this, were Jewish. They were all white women, and probably all were Jewish. The ones that I remember that were the nicest were the Jewish teachers back then. I'm talking about back then. I'm not talking. It was a different reality in the 50s than it is now. But within our household, my mother, whose people were Native and white and African, they were, and my father, whose people were from South Carolina and dark skinned and had been slaves. I think there was only one line in my mother's whole line that was a slave, and we traced her back to Africa. But in the community, they were light skinned. They were seen as light skinned by by people in our community. They were seen as those Martins. They were always here. They were never slaves. They're out of those mountains because there's a place called the Welsh Mountains where free blacks lived, Native Americans lived, and there were poor whites up there, and they all intermixed. And that was who our family was. And everybody in the community knew that. And so the people from the South that were coming actually looked down on my mother's people because they were looked down on because they were light skinned, hadn't been slaves, and were not seeking what the majority of people coming from the South were, which was to assimilate, to belong to the Christian church, to get a good education, and be a part of the community, of the white community. And my Martin people did not want that. They wanted their land back that had been taken. They wanted to live their native way like they had been living before the Europeans came. So they had a whole nother concept about what freedom was than my father's people. And that was before we found out that my grandfather on my father's side was actually Native American from South America, that he had native roots. They either didn't know about it or they just didn't talk about it. So there was colorism within the family. There was stress within our family about who the children, should be with more. Should we be with the ones from the South? Or should we be with the Martins, those wild people from the mountains, those, what do they call them? Triracial isolates. That's what they called the people who were mixed race. And, it was interesting, to say the least. And now that I look back, I'm learning from both sides. I can understand the wanting to assimilate because you want to get as far away from slavery as possible. And the best way to do that is to learn how to read and write and think and open your own businesses. So I understand that part of it. And I understand the part of wanting and yearning to live indigenous, to live on the land, to believe in creation, to preserve the earth, to respect other human beings. And, that's where I'm at right now, honoring both sides and understanding where they're coming from, so that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing, Sister Nita. Is there anyone else that would like to share, add to the discussion on your experiences with image colorism? I'll share mine. I kind of like what Sis Carmela was saying, when I was in school, like you notice the difference. You may not know why, but you do notice when you feel like you see that you're being treated differently. And I've been in school predominantly in Arizona, so I've always been maybe one of two melanated people in my class, in my entire school. I grew up around mostly Caucasians and Hispanics. But I do know when I was going in Scottsdale, when I was in school out there, and I was one of only a handful of melanated students. And, at times the teacher would, they would have like a special contest where if you finished your work at a certain, we had just different projects we had to do. And she would keep track each time you achieved each level. And I was just far and ahead above everyone else with what I was doing. And then it was going to be this great grand prize at the end. And she just stopped the entire competition. I guess because I never knew like why. She never said why she was stopping it, why it wasn't going to continue. But I just noticed then, I was like, I just felt that was just odd to me that she would do that. I know another time, another teacher, I had a male teacher, and he had and again, it was a completely different school. We had a contest where if you finish your work or you do certain accomplishments, you would get these certain little like faux dollars that he had, and whoever accumulated the most dollars at the end of the school year, we're going to go on a fishing trip with him. And I remember I was so excited about that. And I was like, again, I had the most dollars. And then again, he just abruptly stopped the competition. I just remember one day he just handed me like a bigger pile of baseball cards than he gave the other students. And I guess that was my consolation prize, that he wasn't going to continue on with that contest. And just different things, like when it was my birthday and the teacher brought the Caucasian girl, he brought her into the middle, her birthday, he brought her to the middle of the class and he strung happy birthday to her on his guitar. And then when it was my birthday, he did nothing like that. It was no acknowledgement whatsoever. So it's just different things that you see that you get treated differently. And there are people out there that say, oh, you just victim mentality. You just want to find something. You're not being discriminated. But all you know is that you see the difference, you feel the difference. And no one's ever going to write in blood, I'm doing this to you because you're melanated. I'm doing this because they're white. No one has ever said that and will ever say that. But I know from what I've experienced from people in my family, circle, friends have experienced, there's a difference that's made based on what people see. If they like the way you look, if they like your color, if they like your hair texture, they do treat you differently. And so hopefully with these, hopefully I know with these next 3 speakings that my Dr. Malo is going to do. Hopefully we can continue to expose it, but we're exposing it so that we can heal from it, so that we can know how to do better. So I yield the floor to anyone else out there that would like to share, to add anything you would like to say. The floor is yours.
Peace and love, family. I just wanted to quickly say that this topic itself, image and colorism, it's so broad and there's so many different experiences that could be mentioned in regards to either of the two, colorism or image. But for me, I would speak on image and something that I see that is a necessity in our society, in today's society. But yeah, so I definitely feel like um the acceptance from parents despite the difference and for I guess this one would be colorism, the skin tone, those institutionalized preconceived notions that we have that come and stem from the Willie Lynch syndrome. um, I see those things fading away, but I definitely want to drive home the importance of pointing it out because I think a lot of people really like surface it, like they skim over it like it's non-existent, like they've not been biased or
No, excuse me a minute, Sister Shatika. This is what I was referring to. I just want, I'm going to touch with all of those things in next week. What I want is for everyone this week, right now, is to share your personal experience that you've experienced, if you have experienced it, rather than go into the other ramifications of it and what have you. It's a specific reason. It's just our own personal experience. What have you experienced with either if you have or you haven't? Sometimes people haven't, but if you have, what have you experienced personally, as opposed to going to the generalization and what have you with others. That's really what I was asking about. I'm not trying to be rude. I just we really want to get that out, because sharing our own personal experiences with people, that, because remember, we may not have very many people on here right now on the Zoom, but people are going to hear that later. And sometimes when we share, it causes other people to share. It's our own personal experiences. That makes sense?
Yes, ma'am, completely. And as in regards to that, I actually have not really experienced any image or colorism issues. I thought that was peculiar when I thought about it to be here in Memphis, Tennessee. But yeah, I don't have a personal experience, so I'm gonna give.
All right. Thank you so much, Sister Tika. And floor is open. Anyone else that would like to share about your personal experiences with image and colorism?
All right, I'm not going to give mine at this time because I have throughout the next 3 weeks they will come out, and I will share those experiences. But it's going to be the last week. Next week we will deal more with the self-image. The week 3 more with the colorism. But there are more ramifications, and there's a lot of things to these issues, and that will come out. Some things that will surprise you. The last week, that's when we talk about the solutions. That's when we talk about what can be done today. Those are the things. That's why I specifically wanted to wait until that week. So Shatika, that time, bring it on during that time. Okay. And anyone else?
All right.
Brother Mark's been kind of quiet over there. He's over there. He didn't want us to.
Oh, greetings, Brother Mark. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. How's everyone?
Great. How are you?
I'm well. I'm blessed. Well, since you call me out, um, with my years of experience, some people say wisdom, but I'll say experience. Colorism actually happens within a lot of races. And I'll give you an example, is what Doc was mentioning. So I recall probably 15, maybe 15, 20 years ago, I'm in a court case. Um, and at the time, I had a friend uh, who was going to court with me. And we also had a couple friends, one being an attorney that wasn't on the case, but was there to look because we're representing ourselves, and another gentleman who was another attorney. And I don't consider myself to be quote unquote light skinned, but I just happen to be a darker hue than the attorneys. And it was mentioned basically that the bloodline wasn't as strong because my hue was a little bit lighter, and I might not get the same results as other with a darker hue. And so that can be a form of colorism because you're trying to separate within your own group as being, and we always talked about the house Negro and the field Negro. And those are the things that's been embedded even as you come through today. And it doesn't matter what realm you in. So whether it's in a political realm, whether it's at work, whether it's just within your family at a family reunion. And if you pay attention, and I know this sister says she's in Memphis and she hasn't really noticed it, but if you actually pay attention, you'll see how people group together based on that. And it's something is subtle, but it's almost innate because it was kind of bred from years ago. So in a sense, we've probably all experienced it. The question is, did we recognize it or actually know that it was happening at that point in time? But that's all I wanted to share. So I have experienced it within my own group, even within my own family. I remember growing up, and my auntie would say, she would call me Orange Man, and my hair in the summertime will get a tint of orange to it.
Right.
And so that was another way. So when you're growing up, you understand that even your own family start to separate you based on how you look, if it's not exactly the way everyone else looks, or there's a change. So we experience that. It's just, when do we recognize it? And then what is the effect? And I'm quite sure, knowing Doc, over these next couple of sessions, we're going to start talking about the effect that it actually has on you, even though you might think it doesn't affect you, but it will. Be looking back, reflecting now, and just sitting here, I'm like, yeah, it affected me as a child. My auntie said that, right? So going back to my friends and the attorney, it kind of put me off, like, well, I don't think I'm gonna share this with them now because they're on a different side and they believe in this. So, but that's my experience. Didn't want to take up too much time. I know the moderator is supposed to cut me off at some point, but I'll go ahead and yield.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing, Brother Mark. Take that.
And
You
even
know,
though, go ahead, Sister Carmela. Go ahead.
as Brother Mark was sharing, I remember something that happened something that still happens, I think, within my family. There are some of my family who they call red bone. And when they go outside in the summer, they have this reddish tint to their suntan. And I was not red bone. I think it's called red bone. I can't remember.
Yes, it's called
Is it red bone?
Yeah.
Okay. And they were considered to bring out that natural native, to show that we were here. color of our people, but they call them Indian blood. So I do remember that, and I'm not red bone. So, but I know that a lot of people in my family are. If I go out and outside now, I'll turn darker. My sister goes outside and she turns red. I yield.
Yes, I wanted to chime in too. I was just thinking about, like I was talking about my childhood, and one of my brothers was the golden child, and he happened to be the lightest one in our family. He was the smartest one, the cutest one, and I remember my aunt, one of my aunts, when she would come through. She used to babysit us, but she would walk us downtown sometimes. And at point, there were sometimes that she would only take him, my particular brother, with her. She was, she was darker, and this cute little light skinned kid, my baby brother. And also my grandson, he was born with hazel eyes and kind of blondish colored hair and light skin. And it was just interesting to me because we would be out with my grandson, my daughter and I, and my grandson, and people, African American people would look at him and look at me and say, "I know you're proud to have him." It really hurt me that you would think that if he didn't look like that, I wouldn't love my own grandchild.
Right.
Because I have grandchildren that run the spectrum. I have dark grandchildren and light skinned grandchildren, long hair, short hair, nappy hair, good hair, and those are my babies, my grandchildren. The same way with even within myself, having four children and having dark skin and light skin, like my daughter, who is my youngest, is the lightest of all the children. And they will, even within our family, they would say, "Oh, she's getting advantages because she's light skinned." And my daughter said, "When I get married, I'm married a brown skinned man. I don't like being the only light skinned child you." And she did. She married my son-in-law is brown skinned. Anyway, but that just brought it up. This is a really good conversation that we're having. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ashe.
Oh, please go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying, Ashe, I agree. This is a great topic.
And I was going to share just one. Like I said, I didn't want to say a whole lot because I'm going to be talking a lot the next few weeks. But one thing is that I remember when I was very young, different fathers. The father that we grew up with, our stepfather, he was not the father of any of us, but he was with us since we were 8 years old. My brother was very, very light skinned compared to myself and my sister. And part of it had to do with me being the oldest. Okay, even though he and I were only 10 months apart, and my sister and I were only 3 years apart, I always felt like I was much older than them and, helped take care of them and what have you. But so, and it was always those two against me. But I remember we went to go visit my, like we do every, summer, visit my grandparents, and we were all, just little children, we were playing, and he fell in with the crowd that were some of the Hispanic kids, and and me just playing the kids, and you don't understand what's happening at the time. You just know what they're doing and saying and how it makes you feel. Well, they just fell in with him, with my brother, and they wanted to play with him. But what actually hurt was when he gathered with those two other kids, and they were laughing and talking about, well, we're going to go play and you can't come because you're too dark. So, and it was like, but that's my brother, So, and so I couldn't understand, but like I said, and he wasn't probably with my brother Donald. It wasn't more so with him as far as the for him, because he was a kid too, colorism, but he just said, well, they liked him and they wanted to play with him, but he was going to be against me because I'm the oldest, so that was his chance to get back at me. Okay. So, but when that happened, that you start to, especially as a child, and you see these type of things, the differences, it's like, and you think about it, and you really don't. It's not incorporated into the point that that you dwell on it too much, except when it happens again, and it happens again,
Mhm.
and it happens again. Okay. Then you start to see the patterns, I think that Tracy talked about. Okay. So those type of things. So anyway, that's just one little experience that I will share. There are many more, but thank you for that, listening.
Thank you, Dr. Malo, for sharing. And what Brother Mark was talking about, that did, jog some things in my mind as well. I tend to have close friends that were more chocolate than myself. And so I did notice sometimes from other people, sometimes I did get treated differently because I don't like to use the term light skin, but just not as melanated as them. And so I did get treated differently. Sometimes it was like, or if I'm in, one time I'm in this, I don't know, I don't want to bumble, but I did notice sometimes that I would get treated differently because I wasn't as chocolate as them. And so people would kind of look at me different, and I was kind of the outsider. So that just jogged my memory what he was saying. It definitely goes so many facets and layers to it all. So so many different experiences that we encounter. But definitely, so thank you all so much for everything that you've shared. Dr. Malo, did you want to do a wrap up, or would you like me to close?
No, that pretty much just, if no one else has any other comments or anything to share, just let them know that, reiterate that next week, I'll delve more into the self-image, what it has done and caused and a lot of things. And then the following week more into the colorism. I'll give some of the from my sources and what have you. And then the last week, that will be the week for the healing, for the solutions. And there's more solutions than what I will talk about. Others will, encouraging you during that time to speak on that topic, and, during that discussion time, and share with us what you have encountered and so forth. And so that's all I have to say. So.
All right. Thank you so much. So join us all next week. Dr. Mailer will continue with It Takes a Crystal Village podcast, speaking on the image and colorism and its effects. Even still here in 2025, we'll still continue to use this Zoom meeting ID. This is a little bit different from our previous Zoom IDs. So please make sure this Zoom meeting ID is 988-641-64221. Passcode 365929. And join us again next Wednesday, 3 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the same channel on What Needs to Be Done Today Network. Thank you all so much for being here. Just a reminder, this podcast is sponsored by the MAAT American Aborigine Tribal Nation. You can show your love and support to the podcast, as well as support our projects where we are helping those with food, water, and shelter. That's one of our major projects that we are fundraising for. You can definitely donate via Cash App to $WNTBD Today Podcast. Thank you all for watching, for being here. Thank you all so much, podcast team, and all of our tribal family. See you all next week. Peace and love.